He's hosting the NBA draft on ESPN once again. Jalen Rose, Michael Wilbon, and Jay Billis, and a cast of thousands with Rece Davis, who's back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Rece?
I'm doing great, Rich, and I thoroughly enjoyed the Phil rant while I was waiting, too. That was great.
It's really ridiculous. Could you imagine look, I'm going back and forth with whether it's good that Dolan is going to be with the straight shots and delegating, which is kind of what you want your owner to do. But, you know, what do you think? Is Cuban not going to be locked in on what Dallas is doing? You know, I mean, Jeannie Buss with what – the Lakers are up to. I mean, this is absurd. And you must be seeing it playing out on all the back pages today there in New York.
Yeah, we are. And yes, last night on our draft preview show, I took great delight in holding up the Daily News with Phil dressed as Santa Claus and, talking about the possibility of trading Porzingis. Now, I suggested that if they had him dressed as Santa and if he indeed did trade Porzingis, that they should put a lump of coal in Phil's stocking wrap.
You want to pick up the phone on Rece right there, Law. He's on a cell phone, probably deep inside the heart of Barclays Center here, getting ready for the draft tonight. Yeah, we saw that back page too. I mean, they have been just absolutely roasting Phil Jackson. Unless he's just going ahead right now and trying to send a message all the way to Latvia to try and figure it out. Is Rece back on?
Yeah, Rece is back.
Okay. So you were saying that a lump of coal should be in that stocking?
Wrapped in a pink slip because it seems irresponsible. And look, it may be that there's some grand plan. I've heard people say today, he's trying to take that tactic that he used often as a coach in shaming players publicly to get them in line with what he wanted. But I think the difference, Rich, and you've alluded to this, in the Knicks and some of the other teams who are trying to change directions, Philadelphia, apparently now Los Angeles with Magic and Rob Pelinka, they appear to have a plan. I don't know what the Knicks' plan is, other than to tick everybody off or, bully Carmelo into accepting a trade. But, I think he's like 86 games under 500 during his time running the Knicks, and some of that's unavoidable for the early times. But it's harder to see what the plan is with the Knicks than it is with some of the other teams.
Rece Davis joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show from Barclays Center in Brooklyn. So when do the Sixers actually go on the clock? You go on the air at 7 Eastern. Is that when shortly thereafter the commissioner puts the Sixers on the clock tonight?
It'll be about 7:30. There's technically the first half hour is like a draft preview show.
Okay.
Then Adam Silver will step up and he'll put the Sixers on the clock, and the process then needs to turn into payoff when they bring Markelle Fultz in.
Well, the conversation is that the Fultz drafting is the process's conclusion. What are you hearing about on that front from folks like Billis and other insiders that are around you, Rece?
He's probably the most complete player in the draft, although, Jay pointed out last night that he only shoots 65% from the line, and while his shot might look better than Lonzo Ball's, Lonzo's a pretty effective shooter, really good athlete, outstanding ball handler. I think it's going to help them because a couple of the Sixers that I talked to earlier, while very high on Ben Simmons as a prospect, did express some reservation about him being, the sole ball handler. And I think maybe having Simmons and Fultz together over the course of the next couple of years, if Embiid can stay healthy, which as much as I like him as a player and as a guy has not proven that he can do yet, but if he stays healthy and Simmons and Fultz, can come close to reaching their potential, that's a very good trio around which to build. And
then we're assuming Lonzo goes second overall. That would be one of the first surprises if that does not happen. And if it does, then the draft essentially begins at 3. Correct? That's the way is that the way you guys are looking at it tonight?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the Lakers are really interesting because they've dumped some salary with Mozgov gone and bringing in Lopez, who's just under contract for one more year. That will free them up for next year. I think it seems most people believe their ultimate dream is to somehow pull off a deal to get Paul George, maybe pursue LeBron in free agency next year, and then have Lonzo there as their threesome to try to ultimately take a swing at the Warriors at some point in the future. So, and at 3, with Boston selecting, Ainge has accumulated all of these assets. And I thought Tom Penn, who's our front office expert, perhaps described Boston best last year, and I think it still applies when he says for the Celtics, there's a whole lot of good, but not much great. They need to take some of these assets and some of these draft picks that Ainge has accumulated and turn that into great, either by selecting a great player, whether that be Jason Tatum or Josh Jackson, presumably, or putting it together to make a trade to get a great player. Because they were the number one seed in the East, but it was obvious in the playoffs they were vastly overachieving. I mean, it's a credit to them, but they just don't quite have that greatness to, look at them as a true championship contender. While I say that, but I still applaud them for doing what they did. It's remarkable given their roster, I think.
Reese Davis in the Honda Insider Report, the host of tonight's draft coverage on ESPN, joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. Our poll question today that's up on our app is, who's the most likely individual to be traded tonight? Paul George, Jimmy Butler, LaMarcus Aldridge, Kristaps Porzingis, or nobody? What do you choose, Reese?
I'm going to say nobody tonight. Although I know the Paul George stuff is still going, I don't think that's going to happen that quickly. I imagine it ultimately will because they don't want to just let him walk. But I'm going to say tonight, among those, I'll say it's nobody.
And then Paul George goes when? When does that happen, do you think?
I don't know. I think whenever they can squeeze out the best deal, and can the Lakers? The Lakers do have, they do have a pick later on that they could package together. Maybe it's, maybe it's a Julius Randle deal that could entice the Pacers. But I think my guess is he will go before the start of next season, probably sometime in that free agency period, which opens July 1st.
All right, Reese, let's get inside the broadcast right now. Which polysyllabic former Soviet bloc nation player concerns you to pronounce the most tonight, Reese?
I was just going through some of those. The good thing is I've got them all phonetically.
Okay, so you're hooked on
phonetically ready to go. I think.
Give me one
with a lot of vowels. Because it's early in the draft. It's not Soviet bloc connected, but I'll say it's a Nilikina just because it's got that T in there, and if you're not careful, the silent T will get you every time.
Can trip you up. After we saw what happened to our friend Joseph Buck over the weekend, are you well versed on who's with whom, the wags for draft wags, if you will, this evening?
I am versed enough, and also will be 1,000% certain before I say that. I hated to see that happen to Joe.
Hey,
of course,
people get bad information.
Things great all the time.
He always does. Yes.
He's the best.
In all seriousness, are there plans by the producers at ESPN to hand LeVar Ball a microphone tonight during your coverage?
We, kidding aside, Rich, we do plan to talk to him, not at the expense of Lonzo's moment. This is about tonight, Lonzo. But LeVar commands attention, and people react, and they watch, and they click, and they listen, when he says stuff, even if it is to get angry at him. But I think he's interesting tonight because he was out there before the draft lottery was set saying, my son's going to play for the Lakers. I'm going to keep saying it until I make it true. And while certainly, that's sort of just a coincidence that it happened that way, it's interesting.
Okay.
And with the notable exception of a couple of highly offensive things he said, most notably on Colin Cowherd's show, I guess, and a couple of other times, for the most part, he's a WWE character. He's a hype man. He's out there, trying to build a little bit of a business. I don't know whether he's popping up his training business or trying to get this big baller brand off the ground. What I really want to know, the only question, I don't know if I'll get a chance to talk to LeVar tonight. I want to know about this shoe thing. I mean, how does this work? Did he hire a cobbler and put him in the garage?
Yeah, right.
Where's the shoe being made? How does one go about and say, hey, I'm going to have someone build me a shoe? And that's the one thing I want to ask him.
Okay. So, and then when it is all said and done tonight, you're there for first, second round, and then a post, and then what's next for you? College football season?
Football.
Oh,
yeah,
it's right there, isn't it?
Turn the page to college football just around the corner.
Reese, just hearing those two words. Seriously, I just really enjoyed hearing those two words back to back.
They are lyrical, aren't they? They just sort of soothe the soul.
Yes. By the way, I don't know if you heard when he called into my show, and I will give this to you for your game day coverage later on in the fall. I asked Coach Harbaugh, asked Jim how he knew what the size of the Pope's foot size is. His wife did the spade work on behalf, and that he had to get a one size larger than his actual foot because the Pope wears orthotics, Reese. That information. Just somehow, some way, quote the Rich Eisen show on that when you use that. Okay, Reese?
I will do that. That's perfect. I love that.
Okay, very good. I look forward to watching your coverage tonight. Oh, yeah, one last thing, too, Reese, in all seriousness as well. What about the tweeting? Has the NBA told ESPN to stay away from tweeting, even though everybody else is doing it during the draft?
I wouldn't say that they've told us to stay away from it, Rich. I think what's happened is that we've sort of made a decision that, you want the announcement, you want the moment. You want the moment on television, so they go ahead and do it. Now, if a reporter digs it up independently, nobody's putting the muzzle on anybody from tweeting it out. Meaning, you know how these things work from your work on the NFL draft. Mm-hmm. At some point, people have to know where the pick is when the pick's in, and that type of thing, I think, is not where the news is being broken. But if somebody gets it from a general manager or somebody in the room or a player agent and they put it out, they put it out. So we try not to worry about that too much. But we also, just from the viewing experience, we give it the moment and let them do it. There are only 5 minutes between rounds here and 2 minutes in the second. So, you're not killing anybody or holding news back for the most part by the time those picks are in, if they're made.
Have a great broadcast, Reese. Thanks for joining.
All right, Rich. Thanks, buddy.
You got it. Reese Davis joining us. Jay Billis on that broadcast tonight will be on our show tomorrow.
The Rich Eisen Show. Weekdays at noon Eastern on radio stations across the country and audience.
If you like that, please download our app. There's lots of fun things there other than just more of the videos you just saw. You can call us from the app. You can email us from the app. Just download it. Trust me, you'll enjoy it.